Welcome, yogis. This is a myofascial release practice that we're going to work through here today. And for our practice, we are going to use 2 blocks and potentially a blanket, depending on some of the tissues that we work into can be very, very sensitive. So our blanket is the tool to lay over the blocks to just soften it a little bit. We are going to be working on kind of into the hips, into the glutes, a little bit into sort of the low back, the QL muscles that sort of connect into the hip space. A lot of work into the posterior here to just kind of give a good release if you're carrying a lot of tension. If you ever feel it in your low back, sometimes that's just coming from like really tight glutes. And then of course we're gonna directly kind of target the low back with some release. So if you need to grab a few things, grab a couple blocks, grab your blanket, and we will start laying down, but have your blocks just beside you to help so that they're easy to grab, I should say. And I did have a bolster. I've kind of just grabbed a bolster close by. Maybe we may end up using it just as something to support under the ribs, just as like a soft thing to lay on. So you don't necessarily have to have a bolster for this practice, but it might be a nice thing for a little bit later. So have a lay down, have your blocks right next to you, and stretch everything out for a moment. Shake out through the legs, shake out through the arms. Just have a pause. Depending on what it is that preceded your practice today. There could be some things that are still distracting in the mind. So let's find some rest. Find and grounding through all those touch points on the backside of the body. Finding a nice rhythmic breath, an even inhale and exhale. Watching the breath as it moves. This is always one of our best tools for anchoring into the present moment. And with this type of practice, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes to deeply relax because of the nature of the sensation being strong or very strong, depending on the area. So before we explore further, let's find that space. Find that energy of deeply relaxed, restful, very full breath. Really allowing not just the diaphragm to move and breathe, but also its mirror, that pelvic floor down at the base of the torso. See if both of them can expand and contract. Last couple breaths. And then slowly, when you do get to that next inhale, let's bring those legs in, give ourselves a nice, good, strong squeeze. Rock and roll just a little bit. Just starting the beginnings of that release through that low back. You could grab onto the knees individually and just give yourself some room to make bigger circles, kind of feeling almost like a circular massage moving around the sacrum. Go for one or two more in your first direction. And then eventually slow it down and start to take those circles the other way. So maybe those circles start out a little bit small, and then they can get bigger and bigger. Just adding a tiny bit of drawing in of that low belly, pelvic floor to give some stability. This will help your circles be a little bit bigger with control. Go for two more. And then we will plant the feet down. We're going to take both of our blocks. And to start us out, I'm going to take the blocks on their lowest setting and just sort of butt them up right next to each other, sliding them underneath my low back here, low sacral area. I've got more of my sort of tailbone resting onto it than I do my actual low back. And then just give yourself a moment to kind of just test a little bit here. So take those knees up, those feet off, and then you'll sort of notice if there's anywhere kind of like pinchy pokey, just adjust a little bit so that you can find some support without that. And then we will take those legs and we're just going to stretch them up towards the sky. Go for some ankle circles to start things out here. Those arms can rest wherever feels the easiest. Stretching those heels up if you would like. And then we'll gently return the feet back down onto the floor. So I'm going to take the blocks and I'm going to slide them down just a little bit so that I end up in that sort of meaty top section of my glutes. And I'm going to take them just a little bit kind of wider. So what this looks like. So previously I sort of had the blocks sitting kind of flat like this. Now I'm sliding them down. And I'm letting them sort of angle and get a little bit wider so that this top edge of the block is really finding this top soft edge here of the glute. Getting into our glute min. We're gonna let the feet either stay onto the floor or you could explore letting the feet lift eventually, but give yourself a few breaths. Feel free to just like adjust the angle of the block just so you kind of really find that top soft edge. And don't worry if you are bang on, you don't have to be in exactly the same spot as me. There's such a wide area that we are going to explore. So just find that first spot that seems interesting. Let yourself rest here. So pinning the tissues is where we are starting, which means that we are just allowing our weight to rest down into the blocks. Getting to know the sensation. Sensation tends to show up relatively quickly, but we kind of usually need a few breaths to actually assess our response to those sensations more than anything. And if you're feeling like you are able to relax here a little bit, you could start sticking one leg up into the sky or the other leg up into the sky. This is going to bring sensation up. So again, give yourself a chance to just sort of notice the response in your system to the sensation. It may get a little excited, but can we relax back into it? Big belly breaths. The more time we can give to each of these places, the more we are going to encourage release. There are these little receptors within our tissues called Ruffini receptors, and they observe this pressure, and they will signal the central nervous system to send a signal up to the brain that there is a lot of tension here, and the brain will go, okay, release tone, i.e. release that tension. And so eventually a softening will start to take place. A rehydrating will start to take place. Now, if you would like, this is always optional. Test it out. If it's too much, just come back into stillness. We can let the feet open just a little bit wide, not crazy wide, and then bring the legs back together. And you'll notice that that sensation is going to move. It's going to change a little bit. We have to very softly engage the glutes to make this happen. So it's going to perhaps be more. This is a version of shearing. So we're pinning those tissues and then just shimmying them side to side a little bit. Go for a couple more. Okay, so slowly, 1 foot at a time, let's bring it back down. So the blocks probably staying roughly at the same angle, but we're just going to slide them down our glutes just into a next section of tissues that you have not felt the pressure yet. So we're using that top edge of the block. You might almost feel like it is sort of hugging or digging into that top edge groove above your sit bones, which is good. You can move the blocks closer together towards the spine, that tailbone, or they can go a little bit wider out. I'm aiming for a little bit closer to the tailbone for this current placement that I have here. I'm just playing around. So again, keep the feet on the floor. See how this feels to start us out. And if it's not too bad, you could test lifting one knee. Maybe that leg goes up into the sky, potentially both legs. Now, we've likely found a kind of often angry muscle known as the piriformis. So possibly those legs up into the sky is just a little bit more than we really need for today. So the feet could stay down onto the floor, or again, one leg alternating to the other. It's just finding a way to rest in here. Now, if the feet are down on the floor or up in the sky, same option applies. The knees or the feet could go for those sort of opening and closing actions. If the feet are on the floor, it's going to feel a bit like a butterfly. If the feet are up in the sky, we're just sort of opening and closing them side to side, just adding a little bit of extra movement. Only if it feels like the tissues in the nervous system are able to stay relaxed. Go for one more side to side. Okay, so we're going to lift the hips and readjust the blocks. Now, the angle of the blocks can probably stay how it is, but I'm going to slide them wider. Actually, decently wider. And what this is going to do is it's going to take this corner of one of the blocks. So previously, my blocks were sitting kind of a little bit more like this. They're relatively close together. I'm going to slide them wider so that this corner starts to hit almost like a little bit more of the glute, just right straight above the sit bone. And again, ballpark area, you don't need to be bang on exact to where I'm at. We're just finding a little bit of a sometimes deeper version, getting into that piriformis. So let those blocks go a bit wide. We really want that corner to be kind of rooting into the center of the glute here. Drop into those extra long exhales, especially if you carry a lot in your piriformis, that muscle that sometimes can cause sciatica. If you are very acutely suffering from that, this might even be something to lay a blanket on the blocks to soften. You can explore lifting the legs, but you may not need that today. You could explore just the tiniest little side to sides with those knees, the little baby butterflies. Okay, and then we're going to let the blocks slide a little bit wider so that we take those corners and we kind of poke them a little bit, not the outer edge because we probably won't be able to stay on them, but we're just sort of letting them come a little bit wider. Almost starting to find a little bit more of our glute med. And depending on if you carry a lot of tension in your glutes or how often you do this practice or what physical exercises you've been up to, this can be a very, very intense space. So just slow breaths. Again, optional butterflies, knees in and out. It could be like microscopic butterflies or none at all. Last breath. And then use a little bit of push, lift those hips. We'll slide the blocks completely out from under us. Let yourself lay flat for a moment. Take a body scan. All right. Slowly, maybe roll to one side or the other. We're going to gently bring ourselves up. We're going to use one block, and I'm just going to grab a bolster here to have something to kind of lay on. I find it to be a nice tool. We're going to work on releasing the TFL right up into the side of the hip here, tensor fasciae lata, which is best name ever, quite honestly, but it's a very tender space. So we're going to use the top sort of medium edge of our block, and we're going to place it right into this little soft groove. So if you kind of pop the hip out, you'll find there's that hip bone. We're just going to aim for that little hollow above it. So sort of laying it down on its side like this, have our bolster kind of where we might need it, and potentially this is going to be a lot. This is a very tender area. So your blanket could be something that you lay in any thickness. The thicker, the softer it will be. So you could just throw that right over the top if you would like at any point. So please don't let your ego decide that this needs to be stronger than your tissues are ready for today. Okay, that's the only thing that's going to ever steer us wrong. So just kind of lay yourself over. Whoops. Lay yourself over and then fall off of it. I'm just kidding. So finding that angle. She's a spicy one. There we go. Okay. Whatever position your legs need to take to make this happen, I'm not too concerned about. And you can stay resting on your bolster, or you can eventually just kind of lay down over the whole thing. I kind of like my top leg to be planted on the floor just so that I've got a little bit of support, but you can kind of play around with that a little bit. And if you've never been into this area of the body through release, maybe use the blanket to start things out. This is very much like a strong massage where you might be tender the next day, especially into areas that have not felt this kind of release before. So blanket can be something to lessen that intensity that you feel later on. So again, we are doing our darndest to relax. Really, really trying to keep everything from the breath and the tissues soft, to encourage the nervous system to maintain its easy, healing, rest and digest space. Certain areas of the body that can be tricky, so find a long, even breath. Maybe close the eyes, just relaxing into it whatever way you need. And as an option, but just remember, these are options, just something for you to test and try. Some days it's needed, some days it's not. We can rock ever so slowly, like your hips are steering wheels. They could rock just the tiniest little bit towards the sky, and then rock a little bit more so they're pointing towards the side. So you'll be able to get a bit of a shearing type motion. So might be helpful, might be not. If you are clenching, resisting, not breathing, holding the breath, these are all telltales. That is just a little bit more than we need for today. Last couple breaths, movement or stillness, whichever works. Okay, some support through those hands as gently as you can. Come off of your block and your bolster. And let's just take a moment to lay flat once again. So coming back to recline so that we can take our body scan. Take a moment to discover how these releases are affecting our tissues. Left side, right side, all the way from the toes right up to the head. Okay, so slowly we will get ourselves settled over to the other side. Again, if you like that bolster to support under the ribs, you can. We're going to find that same soft hollow just right above the outside hip bone, the greater trochanter. Woohoo! We might have one side that is very different than the other. Most likely we do. So just easy, slowly blanket. Even if you didn't use your blanket on the other side, does not mean that it is not something you can't bring in here. Especially if you have maybe a favorite hobby or sport or something like that that is kind of lopsided. Maybe you're, standing in a certain way, throwing in a certain way, anything like that. It will definitely create some different and interesting things, and we will have to accommodate. Slow, relaxed breathing. If you would like, those side-to-side rocks are available as well. Usually I find, especially if it's a very intense area of the body, it's a good idea just to sit in stillness for a while. And then you'll probably notice sensation will lessen to a little bit, sometimes a lot. Then you can add those movements. But if things are loud, sensation-wise off the start, movement is usually not the thing we want to head straight to. Last couple breaths. And slowly again, just coming off it as gently as you can. Take a pause once again in reclined. Give yourself another body scan. See how things are feeling. Have a little shake if that feels good. Okay. So we are going to move upwards. We're going to target into this sort of soft, sort of low back side body here. We're going to use the block also on its flat, this flat top side, same side that we were just using. Now we're going to use the front edge to kind of dig right into the soft tissue just above the hip bone, just above the iliac crest there. So you can kind of, if you want, if you're not familiar, just sort of poke around a little bit. Find that top edge and then that little soft groove that naturally sits above it. What we're going to do is we're going to basically lay with the block, the edge of the block, we're going to put it right onto the top edge of the bone. And then once we kind of sink and settle into it, the block tends to kind of just like slide off it and hit that nice little soft groove. So what this looks like, again, bolster could be an option, so keep it close by. So I am aiming for that side, that bone, and then I'm kind of just like leaning and sinking into it. And you'll notice it slides right up, and it finds there's like a little groove that it will kind of sort of settle itself into. And that is where we are going to pause here. So we're a little bit onto the side, a little bit onto the back. We are not going to roll. You can roll so that the sternum is facing the sky later, but we're not going to roll onto the vertebrae themselves. We're just going to sort of target this sort of low back side body, and it is potentially a space that you carry a lot of tension into. So breathe, relax, notice what is coming up for you. Now you can, if you would like, now or even a little bit later on, sternum, kind of roll it a little bit to the side of the mat and then roll it a little bit towards the sky, and this sort of anywhere within that. You can keep going back and forth with these very small, slow side to sides, or you can just use that path to find something just like a tiny little bit different. Like maybe you're feeling like you need it a bit more into the posterior. So maybe we keep the head and the chest sort of pointing upwards just a little bit. The head can dangle, can rest on the shoulder. Almost there. Big breaths. Slowly give yourself a little bit of lift. And we will gently transition ourselves over onto the other side. So again, that sort of front edge, we're going to aim it so that it starts right on the bony edge itself. And then we're just gonna like lean and slide. And you can sort of play around with the rock of the block as well, to just find that sweet spot. If you would like to start those rocks with the sternum, pointing it to the side or letting it reach a little more towards the sky, you can. Almost there. And slowly give yourself a little bit of lift off of your block. Once again, have a lay down. It is time to take our final rest here, so you're welcome to just grab anything that you might need to feel comfy and restful. A shavasana, if you will, to bookend our release here. Let the shoulders rest, let the arms rest. Tuck yourself in with a blanket if you'd like, just anything that feels good. Let's take one breath in through the nose, let it go out through the mouth. Let yourself rest. I will leave you to spend as much time as you would like in your Shavasana. Let it be a little bit just to balance out sometimes the stronger energies that come with the MFR practice. And then be sure to hydrate well to flush out and help with the exchange of nutrients, new for olds, as well as hydration. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Namaste.